Who let her sit here? This seat isn't for assistants in cheap suits. That was the line that ignited a firestorm inside the world's most important robotics conference. The crowd laughed. The Ashfords, a family of wealthy sponsors, pointed at the lone black woman sitting in the VIP section and mocked her. Security was called. Phones streamed the scene across the internet. But what if I told you that this woman wasn't an assistant at all? What if she was, in fact, the CEO holding the $900 million investment that the entire summit depended on? And what if, with just a few calm words, she could flip the room upside down and leave an empire shaking in its boots? Where are you listening to this story from tonight? Your living room, your kitchen, or maybe on the road? Wherever you are, make sure you hit subscribe, because this story will take you from humiliation to revelation in just minutes. Now, let's begin. Who let her sit here? The voice sliced through the air sharper than the spotlights above the stage. This row is for executives, not assistants in discount suits. The laughter that followed wasn't kind. It was the brittle, performative kind people give when they think they're safe inside a hierarchy. Heads turned, phones lifted, screens glowed in the half-dark. The annual Global Robotics Summit was underway, and humiliation had just taken the microphone. Amara Johnson sat still. Her navy blazer was plain, her blouse pressed, but not flashy. She didn't adjust her seat. She didn't defend herself. She let the echo of the insult drift through the conference hall lined with chrome and crystal. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was focus. The Ashford family sat 2 seats over, their name embossed on the program as platinum sponsors. Richard Ashford Jr., 40-something heir with a jaw too proud and a laugh too loud, leaned toward her with a smirk.
"Seriously, miss, who do you work for? That chair costs more than your outfit." His mother, Elaine Ashford, pursed her lips like someone enjoying bitter candy. Around them, chuckles multiplied. Above the stage, 100 beams of light moved in sequence, washing the hall in blue and silver. Robot prototypes glided across side platforms. Metallic limbs, sensors blinking like fireflies. The air carried the faint buzz of servo motors, mixed with the sterile scent of polish and ozone from freshly charged batteries. Cameras rolled from every angle, broadcasting live to an audience far beyond these 4 walls. A man in the row behind whispered, not softly enough. Maybe she wandered in. Wrong badge. Another voice. Check her pass. Security should know better. Each comment grew the pack mentality. Amara felt it. The shift in the crowd. The way bodies leaned not toward her, but against her. Like a tide preparing to sweep someone out. Her fingers rested lightly on her lap. The fabric of her skirt brushed against the leather seat. She inhaled once, steady, not quick, not shallow. Her eyes fixed on the stage where a humanoid robot lifted a tray and carried it across the floor, steps clicking like shoes on marble. Applause filled the hall, applause that deliberately ignored the cruelty still lingering in the row. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice came from the aisle. A conference guard in a sharp gray jacket approached, tablet in hand. His tone was polite but firm. "This section is reserved for our VIP delegation. May I see your badge?" The moment tightened. Phones rose higher, lenses unashamed. Live stream captions flew across screens. What's going on? Who is she? Laughter mixed with anticipation. The scent of scandal sweeter than the catered espresso outside. Amara turned her head slowly. Her eyes met the guards, then drifted to the Ashfords, who were smiling now as if justice had arrived to escort her out. Richard Jr. folded his arms. Elaine adjusted her pearl necklace. "I told you," she said, voice loud enough for 3 rows to hear. Some people don't know their place. For a heartbeat, the hall was 2 worlds colliding. The glamour of the robotics showcase, all LEDs and polished steel, and the old ugly echo of exclusion. Amara remained seated. She smoothed the crease of her blazer sleeve, then lifted her chin. "I have a badge," she said softly. Not defensive,
Not rattled, just factual. She reached into her bag and placed the laminated pass in the guard's hand. He scanned it, eyes flicking across the screen, pausing longer than expected. He cleared his throat, uncertain. Behind him, a ripple of murmurs. Guests craned their necks. Some whispered. Others typed furiously into phones. The conference's social feed bloomed with speculation. Clips of the Ashfords' insult replayed already, captioned with fire emojis and disbelief. The guard handed the badge back, hesitation in his movement. "Thank you, ma'am. I will check with my supervisor." He stepped away, leaving the tension unresolved, like a violin string pulled but not struck. Richard Jr. couldn't resist. "See? Even security's confused. Next time, dress like you belong." His laugh came too quickly, too sharp, a cover for nerves he didn't recognize in himself. Amara didn't look at him. She didn't look at the guard retreating up the aisle. Her gaze stayed forward, steady on the stage where a presenter adjusted the microphone, preparing to introduce the next segment of the conference. All around her, wealth announced itself. Bespoke suits, jeweled watches catching the light, whispers of mergers and patents. The Ashfords sat draped in generational entitlement, but Amara Johnson sat in silence, wrapped in something far stronger. The insult had been public. The humiliation had been loud. Yet she carried herself as though the hall itself were the guest, and she was the host, waiting for everyone to reveal who they truly were. The applause for the robot demo faded. Lights dimmed, ready for the keynote. A hush swept the hall. But beneath that hush lay another current buzzing phones, streaming comments, 1,000 eyes glued not to the machines, but to the black woman in the VIP seat who hadn't moved. And somewhere in that quiet, the stage was already shifting. Not the stage made of steel and lights, but the stage of perception. The conference thought it was watching a disruption in protocol. In truth, it was watching the opening act of power. The first insult might have passed as a spark. By the second, the spark had caught. "Security!" Richard Ashford Jr.'s voice cracked across marble. He stood now, hand raised theatrically. "This woman is trespassing. Remove her before the keynote begins." The word trespassing did its work. Heads swiveled. Murmurs rippled. Dozens of phones tilted higher, lenses glinting in blue light. A woman muttered, "Oh, it's live now." Captions raced across the live stream. "VIP imposter? Caught at Robot Summit." The conference hall, built for grandeur, glass walls, chrome balconies, ceiling screens alive with robotic animations, suddenly felt like a courtroom. Amara Johnson was the defendant. The Ashfords, prosecutors, the audience, hungry jury. Elaine Ashford added her verdict. Every syllable crisp. "This is a professional environment. Seats like these are earned. If we tolerate counterfeits, we degrade the value of the entire event." Her pearls gleamed under the stage lights. The audience rewarded her with scattered, awkward claps. The guard returned with the supervisor, tall, stern, badge shining. His voice was calm, but public. "Ma'am, we need to confirm your credentials again. Please stand and come with us." The row erupted with whispers. Some leaned forward eagerly, like boxing spectators. One man chuckled, "Nobody with money wears shoes that plain." His friend snorted. Camera locked on Amara. Amara did not move. Hands rested on her lap, back straight. Silence radiated like gravity. To the Ashfords it read as defiance, and defiance was fuel. Richard Jr. smirked. "Notice she doesn't deny it?" Classic. No words, no defense. Just hoping to hide. He turned outward. "This is exactly why standards matter. We can't let anyone slide into positions they haven't earned." Laughter scattered short, brittle bursts meant for powerful ears. From the balcony, "Check her bag," approval roared. The supervisor hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Ma'am, please, cooperate. We need to avoid disruption." The cameras feasted. Screens across the hall lit with laughing emojis and commentary. "She's busted. Escort her out. Robot Summit. Not social services." Still, Amara sat motionless, her gaze fixed on the stage, as if the Ashfords and guards were static. Elaine's voice cut sharper. "You see? No respect for rules. This is what happens when people are allowed in just because of appearances." The pause was deliberate. The insinuation, obvious. Gasps, mixed with brittle laughter. The trial had turned circus. A conference host appeared at the stage edge, whispering into a headset. His eyes darted toward Amara's row. The schedule was slipping, live stream numbers spiking. Viewers weren't watching robots anymore, they wanted blood. The guard tried once more. Tone softened. "Miss, we don't want this to escalate. Please, step out with us." Richard Jr. seized it. Or maybe she's afraid of what we'll find. Maybe she's clinging to that chair before the truth comes out. He smiled at the phones. He knew how to play to a lens. Amara finally moved only to adjust her cuff. Slow, deliberate. The gesture unsettled nearby seats. Online, viewers caught it. Why so calm? She doesn't look scared. But the Ashfords didn't notice. Elaine leaned forward, eager. "Take her badge. Confiscate it. If she belongs here, she can prove it later." The supervisor extended his hand. "Badge, please." Phone zoomed. The live stream chat exploded. This is it. She's done. Amara unhooked her lanyard and placed the badge in his hand without looking, then folded her hands again, posture unbroken. The supervisor studied it. His brow furrowed. He whispered to the guard, who leaned in, then glanced back at Amara. Confusion flickered. Richard Jr. mistook it for triumph. "See? They can't verify it. What more proof do you need?" He spread his arms wide. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we have standards. Without them, the stage would be flooded with frauds." Applause scattered, louder this time. Elaine clapped primly, pearls swaying. Yet a curious silence pressed outward from Amara's seat. She had said nothing, defended nothing. Stillness itself had grown louder than their words. The supervisor cleared his throat, less certain now. "We may need additional confirmation from event management. Please wait here." He and the guard stepped aside, murmuring into radios. The Ashfords laughed openly, convinced of victory. But not everyone laughed. A woman 2 rows back frowned at her phone. "Hold on," she whispered. "This is trending already." Her screen showed the feed, comments flooding in. Some were mocking, others skeptical. Why isn't she scared? Something's about to flip. The hall buzzed with anticipation. Stage lights brightened. The conference host tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue shortly," he announced, voice shaky. But the crowd wasn't watching the stage. They were watching Amara Johnson. And she still hadn't spoken a word. The supervisor didn't return right away. He lingered near the aisle, talking rapidly into his radio, glancing toward Amara as though she were a glitch in the system that refused to resolve. His hesitation gave the Ashfords room to press harder. "Unbelievable," Richard Ashford Jr. said, pacing the narrow carpet before their row like an impatient prosecutor. "We spend millions sponsoring this summit, and we can't even keep the seating secure. This isn't just incompetence, it's a disgrace." His words carried, sharpened by the hall's acoustics. The crowd responded the way a crowd often does, like a single restless animal. Voices rose in unison. "Move her out. She's wasting time. Get her off the feed." Phones tilted closer. The live stream tickers scrolled faster, bursting with emojis and fragmented commentary. She's faking it. Security's too soft. Imagine sneaking into a 900M summit. Elaine Ashford leaned toward Amara, her perfume sweet but heavy, her tone condescending. You could save yourself a great deal of embarrassment if you leave now, dear. No one will blame you for trying. But staying here, digging in, it only makes you look foolish. Amara's eyes did not shift. Her breathing remained steady, shoulders still. She heard every word. She gave them nothing in return. The supervisor finally approached, guard at his side. His voice carried carefully, as though balancing between protocol and theater.
Ma'am, management requests that you step into the lobby while we clarify your status.
The phrasing was polite, but the subtext was clear. She was no longer presumed welcome. The Ashfords smiled, sure the matter was closing in their favor. Richard Jr. clapped his hands once. There. Finally. Let's not waste another second. Take her out. The keynote's waiting. Laughter flared again. Crueler this time. It had the cadence of a verdict, final and smug. Several guests pulled their chairs back to watch more comfortably, like spectators in an arena. Amara rose slowly, not because of their demands, but because the guard had blocked the aisle. Her movement drew a hush, brief, but charged. She stood taller than many expected, the sharp lines of her blazer suddenly dignified against the flood of light from the stage. The guard gestured toward the exit. This way, please. Richard Jr. smirked at the crowd. See? Standards work. Order restored. He bowed mockingly, earning a burst of applause from the balcony. But Amara didn't move toward the aisle. She turned instead, just slightly, so her eyes swept the front rows. It wasn't defiance, it was presence. Silent, unwavering. The effect was unsettling. Conversations faltered. Even phones seemed to lower an inch, as though viewers could feel something shift in the current. The supervisor frowned. Ma'am, we need your cooperation. Still, Amara said nothing. She let the silence stretch, let it ripple into the spaces between laughter and jeers. It wasn't passive silence. It was the kind that carries weight, the kind that makes people wonder if they are the ones on trial. Elaine snapped, unable to bear the quiet. Do you not understand plain English? This section is not for you. She turned to the audience again, feeding their appetite. She thinks rules don't apply. Imagine the arrogance. Phones captured every word. Streams replayed the insult on loop. Captions multiplying. Not for you. Not for you. The conference host on stage shifted uneasily. His voice piped through the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin the keynote in a few moments. But no one was listening. The spectacle in row 1 had eclipsed the robots waiting in the wings. Richard Jr. pressed closer, his voice low but audible enough for the surrounding rows. You can stare all you want, but you don't belong here. Every second you sit in that seat, you prove our point. The crowd murmured in agreement. A chorus. Without individuality. They were no longer people, they were a pack, united in the thrill of seeing someone cornered. Amara finally lowered her gaze to the guard, then to the badge still in his hand. Her expression remained unreadable. The supervisor shifted uncomfortably, as if realizing he'd been holding evidence he couldn't quite interpret. He tucked it into his jacket pocket, as though removing it from view would resolve the contradiction. Lobby. Now, he said again, firmer. The guard touched her arm lightly, meant as a guide. That tiny contact drew gasps and a fresh round of commentary online. They're escorting her. Finally. Watch her cry. But she didn't cry. She didn't resist. She simply stood still, letting the moment expose itself. In the back row, a journalist whispered to her colleague, "This feels off. She's too calm. Look at her posture. This isn't a woman caught trespassing. This is something else." She typed quickly, already drafting headlines. Down front, Elaine misread the silence again. See how she clings? No grace in defeat, no dignity to step aside. Exactly the kind of person who shouldn't sit among leaders. The live stream chat ballooned with laughing faces and exclamation points, and yet, woven through the noise, another thread appeared. A smaller voice online. What if they're wrong? Who is she really? Something's coming. The stage lights shifted, signaling transition. The host cleared his throat again, but his voice cracked under the weight of the spectacle. We'll proceed very soon. The irony was stark. The world's premier robotics conference had lost control. Not to a machine malfunction, not to a failed prototype, but to a woman in a plain navy blazer who had not spoken a word. As the guard prepared to guide her toward the exit, Amara tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing not in anger, but in patience. It was the look of someone timing the world, waiting for it to reveal its hand. The tightening grip of humiliation had closed around her. But in that grip, pressure was building in the opposite direction, silent and unseen. And though no one in the Ashford row realized it yet, the trial was not hers. It was theirs. The guard's hand still lingered near Amara's arm, the pressure of expectation heavy as steel. The supervisor shifted his weight, prepared to usher her toward the lobby. The Ashfords were already smiling, basking in the glow of their imagined victory. And then, Amara moved. Not quickly, not defiantly. She simply straightened her spine, lifting herself to her full height. The hall seemed to breathe differently when she did, as though the air itself had been commanded to hold still. The jeers faltered. The laughter that had ricocheted from balcony to floor thinned, then scattered. What remained was the low hum of the stage lights and the mechanical whir of a demonstration robot idling at the edge of the platform. Amara turned her head, first toward the guard, then toward Richard Ashford Jr. Her expression didn't change, but her gaze carried weight. Richard started to speak some sharp quip, prepared to puncture the tension, but his voice cracked halfway through. He coughed, pretending it was nothing, though his cheeks flushed. Elaine clutched her pearls tighter. "Don't be dramatic," she said, but her voice landed flat, robbed of the confidence it carried minutes earlier. Amara didn't reply. She took one step forward, into the aisle, where every spotlight could find her. She was no longer a shadow in row 1. She was the center of the room. The supervisor cleared his throat, his authority slipping. "Ma'am," the lobby. Amara raised one hand, palm outward. Not a command, not a plea, just a gesture of pause. And somehow, it worked. He stopped speaking. The crowd murmured again, but differently now. The cadence had shifted. No longer the gleeful barking of a pack. Now, it was wary, curious, unsettled. People leaned forward not to laugh, but to listen. Richard tried to recover the ground. "What are you staring at?" His bravado rang hollow. "You think this makes you powerful? You're just delaying the inevitable." No answer. Only silence. And that silence grew, expanding outward, like a tide swallowing noise. It filled the gaps between coughs, pressed against the restless shuffle of expensive shoes on polished floor. Even the livestream audience felt it. Comments shifted tone. "Why isn't she leaving? Why is everyone so quiet? She looks like she knows something." Amara lowered her hand. She walked back to her seat, unhurried, and sat down again. The simple act reverberated like thunder. The Ashfords stared, unsettled. Richard's jaw tightened. Elaine blinked rapidly, fanning herself with the event program, though the air was cool. And through it all, Amara remained motionless once more. Not a word spoken. Not a single crack in composure. Just the unshakable presence of someone who refused to vanish. The host on stage shifted nervously behind the microphone. He was supposed to introduce the next keynote speaker. Instead, He glanced toward row 1, swallowed hard, and bought time with filler words. In just a few moments, ladies and gentlemen, we'll proceed with our most anticipated announcement. But the anticipation in the hall wasn't about robots anymore. It was about the woman who had risen, silent and unbending, against the full weight of mockery. The tide had turned, if only by an inch. But in a room this vast, 1 inch was enough to make everyone realize the balance of power was no longer where they thought it was. The spotlight dimmed across the stage as the host shuffled his cue cards, buying seconds he didn't have. The official program was slipping out of his control, but the audience didn't care. Their attention was no longer on the machines humming in the wings. It was on Amara Johnson, seated in silence at the front row. Richard Ashford, Jr.'s smirk had faltered. He adjusted his cufflinks, then his tie, then his cufflinks again. Little motions betrayed a nervous energy he hadn't felt before. His mother, Elaine, whispered sharply at his side, "Stop fidgeting. Eyes are still on us." She forced a thin smile, the kind meant to reassure others, but convincing no one. The crowd's energy had shifted. The laughter that once rolled freely was gone, replaced by hesitant murmurs. People leaned across aisles, whispering, "Why isn't she leaving?" "Security looks uncertain. Did you see the badge? Something's off." Phones continued streaming, but the tone in the comments was no longer unanimous mockery. Mixed in with the laughing emojis came a growing thread of curiosity. "She's too calm. Feels like she belongs. What if they messed up?" A robot prototype wheeled across the stage, extending its articulated arm to hand a bouquet of roses to the host. The gesture, once meant to wow investors, barely drew a ripple of applause. All eyes were still on row 1. Richard tried again, his voice louder, more theatrical. "Ladies and gentlemen, don't be fooled. This is a common tactic. Show just enough confidence and people start doubting the obvious. But rules are rules. She doesn't belong." Too desperate. A few scattered claps, then silence. Amara sat still, but the silence around her was different now. No longer accusatory. It was watchful, expectant. As though the audience, consciously or not, had begun to weigh her presence against the Ashfords' performance. Elaine leaned forward again, lowering her voice, but not enough. "Stand up, Richard. Assert control. Don't let her steal this moment." Richard rose, tugging at his jacket. He faced the room like an actor demanding applause. "Security, I insist, remove her now. This farce has gone on long enough." The guard shifted uneasily. The supervisor hesitated. The moment stretched. Uncomfortable. The authority that once felt absolute, now seemed brittle. Someone from the balcony shouted, "Let her stay." The words cut through the stillness like a spark. Heads turned. The live stream chat caught fire. "Wait, someone defended her. Maybe she is important." Look at the guards, they don't know what to do. Richard's confidence cracked. His eyes darted to the cameras, to the restless murmurs in the crowd. He clenched his jaw. "This is ridiculous. Don't indulge this spectacle." The host at the microphone cleared his throat again, voice trembling. "We thank you all for your patience. Please stay seated. Our program will continue." His words were paper thin, barely covering the growing dissonance in the hall. Amara didn't rise, didn't speak. She only sat, her face calm, her presence undeniable. And somehow, that was louder than any insult. The crowd, once united in derision, now leaned in her direction not with scorn, but with a flicker of recognition. Something was shifting. Invisible, but irreversible. And in the second row, Richard Ashford Jr. realized too late. He was no longer the one holding the room. The stage lights cycled through their programmed sequence. blue fading to white, white fading to silver. The rhythm of technology marched on, but the human rhythm in the hall had broken. Every breath, every glance, every whisper orbited the woman in the plain navy blazer who refused to be erased. Amara Johnson did not move, but her stillness was no longer defensive. It had become gravitational. Executives shifted in their chairs, unease creeping across their polished facades. Journalists in the back rows raised cameras higher, framing her in long, deliberate shots. The Ashfords noticed. Elaine leaned toward her son, voice sharp but quiet enough to pass for a hiss. "Do something. You're letting her control the narrative." Richard Ashford Jr.'s knuckles whitened around the armrest. "She's just sitting there," he muttered. But the way he said it betrayed the truth. He felt it too. Her silence wasn't absence. It was presence. Down the aisle, the supervisor whispered into his radio, words clipped and urgent. A moment later, another guard appeared, then a woman in a headset with a conference badge that read Program Director. She scanned the row, eyes narrowing when they landed on Amara. Conversations fractured in the crowd. Who is she? Why won't they just escort her out? No. Look, management doesn't look sure either. The live stream captions flooded. This is bigger than it looks. She's not scared at all. Feels like she's waiting for something. Amara shifted, just slightly, and the hall responded like a startled animal. She crossed one leg over the other, smoothed the crease of her skirt, and lifted her eyes to the giant LED screen above the stage, where the summit's logo glowed. A quiet smile touched the corner of her mouth. Not wide, not smug, just certain. The cameras caught it. Screens filled with her face, magnified and broadcast across the hall. For the first time, thousands of viewers saw not an intruder, not a victim, but a woman utterly unshaken. Richard rose again, trying to reclaim ground. "Don't be fooled by this act," he said, projecting his voice. "Anyone can sit still and play mysterious. But leaders act. Leaders don't hide behind silence." But his words clattered to the floor, empty. A few scattered laughs followed, brittle and half-hearted. The tide of the crowd had moved beyond him. Amara lifted her gaze, steady on him now. She didn't blink. Richard faltered mid-sentence. He cleared his throat, tugged his jacket, pretended it was just a stumble. Elaine grasped his arm. "Sit down," she whispered. But the microphones nearby caught it. The audience tittered. Phones lit up with new captions. Ashford's rattled. "He's cracking." The program director approached the row, bent to whisper in the supervisor's ear. His posture stiffened. They both glanced at Amara, then at each other. No action followed. The hesitation was its own answer. Amara finally moved again. She leaned forward, hands resting lightly on her knees, and nodded once small, deliberate, as if she had just confirmed the timing of an unseen clock. The effect was electric. The crowd hushed, drawn tighter into her orbit. The live stream chat erupted. She knows something. This is staged. Watch, something big is coming. The host on stage shuffled his cards, cheeks pale. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, "we will now transition to our next program highlight." His voice cracked. "Please remain seated." But no one was watching him. All eyes were still on Amara Johnson, the quiet queen in row 1, playing a game no one else had realized had already begun. The host's voice wavered as he tried to steer the summit back onto its rails. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, before our keynote presentation, we're honored to introduce our principal investor." His words echoed against chrome and glass, a script delivered without conviction. But the room wasn't following the script anymore. Every gaze was still tethered to Amara Johnson. She sat with the patience of stone, her eyes calm, her hands folded. The crowd buzzed like circuitry shorting under strain. They didn't know what they were waiting for, but they knew it had something to do with her. The Ashfords, blind to the shift, pressed harder. Richard Ashford Jr. leaned across the aisle, tone pitched for maximum audience. Investor? Don't make me laugh. Do you see her clothes? Her seat doesn't match her story. If this is the face of tomorrow's robotics, then tomorrow is a scam. His laugh rang false. But a few nervous chuckles echoed back. People clinging to his arrogance because it was easier than questioning their own certainty. Elaine followed quickly, her voice crisp as glass. Events like this represent excellence. We can't allow them to be cheapened by intrusions. That's what separates leaders from imposters. It should have landed like judgment. Instead, it landed like desperation. Because the signs were changing. A man in the third row frowned at his phone. Hold on, he whispered. NeuroSys Robotics just posted something. He tilted the screen to his neighbor. The live stream comments caught it first. Check NeuroSys feed now. Something's happening. The whisper spread like fire across dry brush. Guests began refreshing their apps, murmurs rising as they read. NeuroSys, the powerhouse name in artificial intelligence and human-robot integration, had just confirmed its CEO was present at the summit. No photo attached, just a cryptic line. All questions will be answered live. Eyes darted back to Amara. Phones tilted toward her. A fresh rush of comments surged through the feed. Is that her? No way. Wait. It fits. The Ashfords hadn't noticed. Richard was too busy grandstanding. You see how she sits there mute? That's not power. That's evasion. Leaders don't hide in silence. He raised his voice, playing for the cameras. If she mattered, she'd say something. Amara finally moved. She rose from her seat not abruptly, not as though shoved by circumstance, but with quiet certainty. Her blazer caught the light, no longer plain but sharp, commanding. She turned, eyes sweeping the rows. The noise in the hall collapsed into a hush, so complete that even the servo motors of the demonstration robots could be heard whining softly at stage left. She didn't speak, not yet. She walked toward the aisle, each step unhurried, and the crowd shifted to watch her path. The guard instinctively stepped aside. The supervisor lowered his gaze. The program director pressed her lips together, as if she suddenly understood what no one else had. Richard barked, trying to hold the ground slipping beneath him. Where are you going? You don't belong on that stage. But the way his voice cracked gave him away. He sounded less like an accuser now and more like a man afraid his stage was about to be stolen. Amara paused in the aisle, turning just enough so her gaze locked on him. She said nothing, only allowed silence to stretch until his face flushed crimson. The audience caught it the moment when the aggressor blinked first. A glass clattered somewhere in the back, dropped by a nervous hand. The sound punctuated the tension like a gavel. The host cleared his throat again, stumbling over his words. Ladies and gentlemen, our principal investor will now address you. His eyes flicked toward Amara, as though begging her to step forward and save him. The crowd inhaled as one. Phones were raised higher than ever, their screens glowing like constellations. The live stream chat screamed, "It's her. No way. Watch. Watch." Amara took one more step down the aisle. Her expression was steady, almost serene. But for the first time, the Ashfords' confidence cracked wide open. Elaine clutched her pearls so tightly her knuckles blanched. Richard shifted backward, colliding with the chair behind him. The door hadn't swung wide yet, but it had opened just enough for everyone in the hall to glimpse what was coming. The host's voice trembled as he raised the microphone. Please welcome to the stage our principal investor, the CEO of NeuroSys Robotics. Every spotlight in the hall swiveled at once. And there she was, Amara Johnson, already standing in the aisle, the calm center of a storm she had never once tried to silence. She didn't rush. She didn't bow her head. She walked forward as though she'd owned that path all along. Phones captured every step, The live stream chat detonated. It's her, the woman they mocked. CEO of NeuroSys? Richard Ashford Jr.'s face drained of color. No, he whispered, too soft for most to hear. No, this isn't. His voice broke. His mother Elaine clutched his arm, nails biting into fabric, but even she couldn't summon words. Amara reached the stage. She didn't glance back at the Ashfords. She didn't need to. The silence from their row was already louder than any jeer they had thrown at her. She took the microphone from the host, her grip steady, her chin lifted. Her first words were short, sharp, undeniable. I am Amara Johnson, CEO of NeuroSys Robotics. The sentence hit like a steel door slamming shut. Gasps cracked through the hall. Someone dropped a glass near the back. Another stumbled over a chair leg. On the live stream, comments blurred too fast to read. Amara's gaze swept across the audience, deliberate and unhurried. For months, NeuroSys has supported this summit. $900 million committed to research, infrastructure, and new partnerships. $900 million meant to build the future. She paused. The number echoed in the room like a bell tolling. And as of tonight, that funding is frozen. The words landed like hammer blows. Frozen. $900 million. Tonight. The crowd erupted, not applause. Not yet, but the chaos of disbelief. Executives clutched at phones. Investors scrambled through notes. A man in the front row whispered hoarsely, "This can't be real." Amara raised her hand, and the noise ebbed. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her authority was complete. "I do not withdraw lightly," she said, "but I will not pour resources into an industry that claps for mockery and calls it leadership. Not while voices like mine are silenced and laughed at. Not while access is guarded by arrogance instead of merit." Her voice was steady, but each line struck sharp, like courtroom verdicts. Behind her, the summit's massive LED screen glowed, with the NeuroSys logo blue against white, unflinching. Richard Ashford Jr. staggered to his feet, face burning. "You can't! This is outrageous!" His voice cracked, desperate. "You're punishing an entire sector over a misunderstanding." Amara finally turned her gaze on him. Her words were measured, lethal in their simplicity. "This was no misunderstanding. The world heard you." The crowd shifted, heads turning toward the Ashfords. The pack that once cheered their insults now stared at them as though watching animals cornered in a cage. Whispers swelled. "That's the family who mocked her. Caught on live stream. It's over for them." Elaine tried to stand, voice trembling. This is theater. Surely we can discuss." "Discussion requires respect," Amara cut in, crisp as glass. "Respect you failed to show." Her words dropped like weights, and the audience recoiled as though they'd landed on their own shoulders. She turned back to the hall. "NeuroSys will release a full statement by dawn. Until fairness and transparency are more than slogans, our partnership here is suspended, indefinitely." The sound that followed wasn't applause. It was sharper, a collective intake of breath, the gasp of an industry realizing the ground beneath it had split. The Ashfords were pale now, their certainty shredded. Richard sat heavily, staring at nothing. Elaine covered her mouth with a trembling hand, and above them, phones continued to stream, broadcasting their collapse to every corner of the digital world. Amara lowered the microphone. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stood still, the quiet hammer that had just reshaped the room. The verdict had been delivered, and there was no appeal. For a breathless moment, no one moved. The words still hung in the air. 900 million frozen. Respect demanded, and the weight of them pressed like lead on every chest in the hall. Then, it began. Phones buzzed violently across the front rows. Investors hunched over screens, eyes wide as real-time alerts chimed in. NeuroSys freezes funding. Robotics Summit deal endangered. Stock apps blinked crimson. One man groaned aloud as numbers on his screen plummeted. The cameras turned, not toward Amara anymore, but toward the Ashfords. Richard Ashford Jr. sat slumped in his chair, his jaw tight, sweat glistening at his temples. He fumbled with his tie, loosening it as though the silk itself were choking him. Elaine Ashford's pearls rattled against each other as her hands shook. "Richard," she whispered, desperate. "Say something. Salvage this." But words would not come. His mouth opened, then closed again, as though every sentence had been stolen from him. The audience, once eager accomplices, now recoiled. Murmurs turned sharp, accusing. "That's the family who mocked her. They cost us the deal. Unbelievable arrogance." A man in the third row stood abruptly, chair scraping across the marble floor. He shook his head, muttering, "I can't be associated with this." Others followed, edging toward the aisles, some leaving outright. The ripple of departure looked less like an exit and more like a retreat from disaster. On stage, the host clutched his cue cards but didn't speak. His eyes darted between Amara, resolute, and the Ashfords, unraveling. The story had already escaped his control, and no script could bring it back. The livestream comments spiraled faster than any PR team could manage. Ashford's ruined everything. Instant karma, respect denied, deal denied. Clips replayed Amara's reveal, cut against the Ashfords' jeers. The internet had already written its verdict. Richard wiped his forehead with a trembling hand. This can't be happening," he muttered, barely audible, his voice cracking under the pressure. His confidence, the smug grin, the performative bravado had collapsed, leaving only a man cornered by consequences. Elaine tried to stand, but her knees buckled. She gripped the chair in front of her for balance, her polished composure gone. Her lips quivered as she tried to form a denial, but the crowd's glares silenced her before she spoke. It wasn't just social embarrassment anymore. It was financial annihilation. Every second, more phones lit with breaking alerts. Investors pulling contracts. Partners reconsidering alliances. The empire the Ashfords flaunted was dissolving in real time. Amara remained silent now, letting the unraveling play out on its own. She didn't need to drive the knife deeper. The room itself was doing it for her. Richard lowered his head into his hands, fingers pressed against his skull. His body rocked slightly, a man unmoored. Elaine leaned toward him, whispering frantically, but the microphones overhead betrayed her. "It's gone. All of it. We've lost everything." The words fell into the room like stones. Gasps followed, then the sharp hiss of whispers. Investors snapped photos, recorded video, not to share in mockery this time, but to archive the moment of collapse. The Ashfords had begun the evening as royalty wealth on display. Voices loud, laughter sharper than glass. Now they were reduced to spectacle, trembling in the spotlight of their own undoing. In the balcony, a voice called out, clear and cutting, "That's what disrespect buys you." Applause followed, not polite, but raw, cathartic, the kind that belonged not to a conference but to a reckoning. Elaine sank back into her chair, her pearl necklace broken at the clasp, beads scattering across the floor. She didn't stoop to pick them up. She stared at the stage, hollow-eyed, watching the future march away without her. Richard slumped beside her, hands slack in his lap. He looked less like an heir and more like a cautionary tale, lit harshly by the LED glow of the Summit logo overhead. The collapse was total. Not next week, not tomorrow, but here, under the lights, under the eyes of thousands in the hall, and millions more online. Amara Johnson had not raised her voice. Yet her silence had delivered the loudest ruin the Ashfords had ever known. The applause that followed was jagged, uneven, a release of energy with no script to contain it. Some clapped in vindication, others in awe, many in shame. But through it all, Amara Johnson stood still, letting the sound wash past her like wind against stone. The Ashfords remained frozen in their seats. Richard Ashford Jr.'s tie hung limp, his hands still pressed to his knees, as though to keep himself from shaking apart. Elaine sat with her pearls scattered across the floor, staring into nothing. Around them, the crowd had already moved on. Eyes no longer pitied them. They ignored them. Power had shifted, and irrelevance was the harshest punishment. Amara set the microphone back on its stand. She didn't bow, didn't linger. She turned toward the aisle, heels striking the marble in an unhurried rhythm. The spotlight tried to follow, but even that seemed unnecessary. She carried her own gravity now. Guests parted instinctively as she walked past. No one dared block her path. No one whispered now. Phones were raised, but the lenses trembled. They were not documenting scandal anymore. They were recording history. The guards who had once tried to usher her out now stepped aside, heads lowered. The supervisor who had demanded her badge pressed his lips tight, as if wishing to disappear. Amara didn't glance at them. She didn't need to. Their shame was already complete. Step by step, she moved through the grand hall. The scent of metal polish and burnt espresso lingered in the air. The giant screens overhead glowed with the NeuroSys logo, and beneath that glow she looked less like a guest and more like the architect of the future. At the back of the hall, the heavy doors loomed. She pushed them open herself, the brass handles cold beneath her fingers. Beyond lay the lobby-high ceilings, chandeliers, a mosaic floor reflecting the shimmer of her blazer. Conversations hushed as she appeared, the echo of her footsteps carrying farther than the buzz of 1,000 phones. No press conference, no entourage, no farewell glance. Amara Johnson walked through the lobby and into the night air as though the entire summit had been nothing more than a room she chose to leave. Behind her, the hall was still roaring with disbelief, panic, and the first cracks of financial fallout. But Amara did not look back. Her message had already been delivered. The storm was no longer inside the hall. It was waiting outside, ready to break across the world. The lobby doors shut behind Amara Johnson with a quiet thud, but the silence didn't last. Outside, the city was alive, with screens. Digital billboards across the convention district flashed breaking headlines. NeuroSys freezes, $900 million deal. CEO humiliated, Ashfords exposed. The story had escaped the hall and now sprinted into the bloodstream of the world. On the sidewalks, attendees spilled into the night, phones glued to their palms. Clips of the confrontation replayed endlessly. Richard's smirk, Elaine's pearls, Amara's calm reveal. Strangers gasped in unison, standing shoulder to shoulder with people they'd never meet again, united by the shock of what they had witnessed. Inside financial offices still lit past midnight, traders cursed as stock tickers bled red. Ashford Industries, once a symbol of robotic luxury, plunged double digits before markets even opened. Calls lit up boardrooms from New York to London. Suspend partnership, draft apology, distance immediately. In newsrooms, anchors interrupted regular programming. "You're seeing live footage from the Global Robotics Summit," one said gravely. What began as a moment of mockery has erupted into an industry-shaking scandal. Investors are calling this the most expensive insult in recent memory. On social feeds, hashtags swarmed, though Amara herself had never used a single one. The commentary was relentless. This is what dignity looks like. She didn't shout. She didn't flinch. She just ended them. Videos of her quiet walk down the aisle looped with music, already turned into symbols of poise and power. Meanwhile, at Ashford headquarters, the board convened an emergency session. Richard Sr., the patriarch with silver hair and tired eyes, listened as directors demanded an immediate response. Reports say his voice shook as he finally rose. "We cannot buy back dignity with silence. We will commit 20% of profits for 5 years to support Black-owned enterprises. effective immediately. It was less an apology than a plea for survival. But the world was already judging whether it was enough. And Amara, she didn't wait for their vote. She didn't stand before cameras or issue a polished press release. She was already gone, seated in the back of a quiet car, gliding away from the conference center. The city lights flickered across her face. Her phone vibrated endlessly, messages from journalists, allies, enemies. But she ignored them. She gazed out the window at the skyline, the hum of the engine steady beneath her. Tonight was not about revenge. It had been about proof that silence could be louder than cruelty, that presence could dismantle arrogance, that change could begin in a single, unbroken moment of composure. Behind her, the hall unraveled. Ahead of her, the world shifted. And somewhere between the two, a storm was only beginning to gather. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. What happened inside that conference wasn't just about business or money. It was about dignity, courage, and the power of staying calm in the face of arrogance. For many of us, especially women of color, this story reminds us that silence can carry more weight than cruelty, and that real change begins when we refuse to shrink. If this story touched you, please leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories.